Hey, welcome back, everybody. It's time for one of our favorite shows this week with Wendy. The only show that shows you the real SoCal state of mind. With your host, Wendy Ross, who after a considerable amount of time working at real estate brokerages in Silicon Valley and Orange County and elsewhere, she decided it was time for something different, and thus was born Veracity Real Estate, to tell the truth about what's happening in the market, and because she felt the time was right for a renewed commitment to bespoke client advocacy at all price levels, something you just don't see in high-price markets like this. So truth be told, I always can't wait for the nuggets of truth that Wendy uncovers in the data each week and her take on where the market's going. So let's not take any more time. Let's bring her in. Wendy Ross. Hey, Wendy.
Hey, good morning. How are you?
I'm good. You sound a little better. You guys have been battling some bug on and off for a couple of weeks here.
We've been poster children for the chest cold, haven't we?
I think you've been passing it back and forth. You passed it around to me a couple of times here, and round and round it goes here.
Sharing is caring.
Thanks a lot. Well, what can you share with us today?
Well, you know me. You can count on me for market analysis you can't find anywhere else. And that also means that sometimes we address some uncomfortable truths, as we're going to today. So, and one of the ways that I can provide the kind of market analysis that you don't find anywhere else is because I work with experts to bring new experiences to light. And just last week, we kicked off our new series featuring elected and appointed officials from Orange County cities. And we started with the city of Costa Mesa's Mayor John Stevens.
He was fascinating. He really
delightful.
Was. Yeah.
He's so invested. I mean, he's passionate. He's invested. You can tell he's not a scripted person. He knows his stuff. He knows his city.
I mean, how many mayors are willing to give out their personal mobile phone number on air so that residents and business owners can contact him directly?
Yeah, he's seriously amazing. A wonderful, wonderful human being.
And I thought he was very real about the challenges ahead and the difficulties in overtaking. You can only push people so far. You know, you got to lead them, but you got to be where they're at too. And
well, wasn't it nice to hear him emphasizing polite discourse?
yes,
politely, respectfully disagreeing. We're going to have differing opinions sometimes. That's to be expected. But can we just be nice?
It didn't seem that radical that long ago, but today.
And yet it is. And yet it is. Well, and he pointed out a lot of things, and so many of the benefits of investing in real estate and the pursuit of the American dream of home ownership. It depends on the cities in which we live. And so we want people like him in place to make it a happier place to be, a more effective place to be. But before we dialogue with the leaders of other SoCal cities, I want to delve into the very concept of the American dream, and that's the subject of our show today. So once again, my Chief Brand Officer, Kara Stewart, is here to help us. We're going to unpack this discussion, but first, let's just take a moment and take a look at the Orange County real estate market. So far this month, as of 6 days in, we had 3,674 active listings. That's 3% fewer than January, which is really interesting. Instead of the supply surging up as we expected, it's actually plateaued, and it may even be trending down. There are currently 1,602 properties in escrow and only 160 sales so far, but that's always a lagging stat. The median sold price, though, is at $940,000 versus $936 for January. So that's up just 0.4%. But again, it's up, and the prognosticators weren't expecting this, and quite honestly, myself included. It's taken 37 days median so far to sell the homes that have sold so far. And if we were to sell out all of the active inventory at this rate of sales, it would take 2.29 months. And that's actually 30% faster than in January. So the pace is picking up. The median price is picking up. And I was one of those people who said that median price in Orange County is probably going to flatline and maybe even dip a little bit for the first and second quarter. And we're not even halfway into the first quarter, and here we are. So things are looking rosier than anybody expected.
Can I just emphasize 3 points you made there, because I want to make sure I heard this right.
Yes.
Here we are in February of 2023, for those listening in the future. And everybody assumes that, one, prices were going to come down, because that's all I'm reading now in the media is prices are coming down, not just here, but even faster in other parts of the country. Went up too fast. Now they're coming down a little bit.
Specifically, I don't think they are saying here. They're making a global statement, and people are inferring it.
I think you're right. So the assumption was it shot up too fast, and it's got to come back down to reality a little bit here. The second is that this is the time of that it was taking longer to sell houses because they were more expensive and more financing's gone up. So everything was taking longer, not the crazy days. And yet you're saying that the price held, even went up a little bump, and it actually sped up a little bit. And then the third thing that always surprises me is we're entering into towards spring. This is when everybody starts putting their houses on the market. That's what I
Right.
always thought.
Well, I think our active inventory level is always going to be 30 to 40% lower than historic norms, but our population isn't dwindling. So people functionally have to live somewhere. So the demand is built in.
It's just none of it's all counter the narrative that I've
I
told. The
know.
prices are going to come down. It's
Yeah.
going to take longer to sell because there's fewer people can afford this stuff, and that people are going to put more houses on the market.
One can only hope. But it's interesting that just this morning I read an article before my first meeting, and I'm sorry, I don't recall where it was, but it was shocking because they said some of these very small rural communities that swelled because of remote work, people could move wherever they wanted.
Right.
They thought that when everyone got pushed back into the workplace physically, that it would free up their housing market, and it hasn't. So I don't know if it's because these people who went and bought homes on the cheap when rates were cheap, if they're just going back to work part-time and not putting that house on the market. They're just keeping it as a second home because they really like that area. So this phenomenon that we're seeing here is apparently it's in far more places than one would expect, that the housing market remains really tight. And when supply is low, prices don't fall.
Someday I'd like to have you guys craft a show and do some data on how many more people, if there are more people, now own more than one home, where they inherited a home like I did, or they decided not to put their house in the market. Typically, when you moved up, you sold your house, and that's how you paid to move somewhere. More and more you're saying, and I'm seeing it, where people are saying, I'm going to hold on to that house if I can.
Well, I'm working on getting Christy Coffey on the air with us one day. She's a VP with a big title company, and title companies have all those statistics at their
right.
fingers. So let's get her on the show, Kara.
Yeah, in fact, I think you did cite that statistic once in a previous show, so I don't have it at my fingertips. But what I will do, Paul, is pull it, and we can create a social post about it and a blog on our website.
Because that's a change. When I was brought up, you bought a house, and then hopefully it went up a little bit, and you flipped it to buy the next house.
Oh, are you talking about the American dream, Paul?
Yeah,
Thank
that
you for
old,
that.
worn-out
What a lovely
idea.
segue.
Wow, thank
Perfect.
you. Thank you for queuing me up for that, Paul. That
That's what I'm
wasn't
here
even
for.
planned. Well, Wendy, thank you so much, and thank you, Paul, for those great questions, because your annual market reports, your monthly and your weekly updates really have become part of the most talked about part of your brand, and certainly this show. And I want to shout out to other real estate professionals, brokers, and realtors who are sharing this data, because they're really seeing that, as Paul said, there are nationwide and statewide reports, but they don't capture the essence of Orange County or look at what we're doing. And you are one of the few people who have emerged as a market analyst hyper-focused on Orange County. So
Thank
thank
you.
you for that. And to our real estate community, please ask us if you need additional data and other ways to work together. We're highly collaborative.
Yeah,
as you can tell.
information is meant to be shared. I mean, if I've done the homework, I'm happy to share it because I really want people to know truly what's going on.
It makes all of us stronger, certainly.
It does.
Well, also because perception changes the market. If we think prices are falling, then don't we suddenly make that come true? Or if we think prices are going up or whatever, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
To a degree, it does.
Yeah, right.
It does, absolutely. And that's the heart of our show today, because the data reveals why today's subject, the American dream, is worthy of discussion. As you said, most of us have been brought up to believe that the home is the cornerstone of the American dream. This idea that homeownership is the attainment of success and why we all work so hard. And what we're finding, and this is certainly open for dialogue, and we really want listeners writing in and contacting us about this, but did the American dream make sense at one point? To an individual, a family, home ownership signified what? Independence, financial security, generational wealth. To the American economy, it certainly was foundational to us building a robust home ownership rate, and that having a ripple effect upon the entire economy, including
Right.
job growth.
Right.
But has that changed? Our ideology is changing, and yet most of us still hope for it. You came across a great study by Bankrate that I think was March 2022. Again, we'll put it up on our site. But it was what, 74% of respondents ranked homeownership as the highest gauge of prosperity. That was even above having a career, children, or a college education.
Amazing, isn't it?
Yes.
3 out of 4.
3 out of 4. But unfortunately, homeownership in America, especially here in Southern California or in
Yes.
Orange County, really is changing. We have ever rising home prices, limited inventory, macroeconomic issues, certainly social inequalities, and ever falling wages. So today we want to ask, is the American dream more of an illusion? Wendy, is that dream fading away?
You know, this is a touchy question because it touches the soul of who a lot of us are and our opinions of ourself and our social stature. And a lot of people are beginning to question. And that's why I wanted to entitle this show Fear and Loathing in Real Estate. I mean, because it's a sort of Hunter S. Thompson-esque question. And there is fear and loathing right now about this savage journey to the American dream. I mean, buyers and sellers alike, this is not one side or the other. They're all kind of shaking off their pandemic frenzy and moving past it. But now they're starting to feel misguided and misled as they're trying to claw their way to the American dream. And they're feeling like it's getting farther and farther out of reach.
Well, let's unpack some of these issues. First of all, we toss around the term the American dream. What does it even mean, though?
You know, it's funny. I had always assumed it meant, you know, the house, the white picket fence, you know, 2 cars, 2 dogs, 2 kids, etc. So when I looked it up, according to Wikipedia, the American dream was coined by James Treslow Adams in 1931. And he said, and I'm going to read this quote, "Life should be better and richer and fuller for everyone, with opportunity for each according to ability or achievement, regardless of social class or circumstances of birth."
That's pretty powerful. But
Right.
in your role as a market analyst and a broker and everything else you do, is that what you're really seeing?
No, I mean, that's not at all the reality of what I'm seeing. And sadly, all too often, it comes down to who you know, not what you know.
Gosh, it's really jarring to hear you say that, but I'm not surprised. As it comes to home ownership, give me an example of how does it factor into the American dream?
Well, first of all, going back to that quote, I mean, I would firmly argue that it is, in SoCal anyway, it's not an opportunity equally available to people based upon their ability or achievement. And more often, again, it boils down to who you know. And that goes for realtors as much as it does principals, buyers, and sellers. You know, if you were born to the right family and you went to college and you wound up with an alma mater and other social connections, all of these contacts gave you a big leg up. So being well connected paves the path towards achieving these different life goals. And virtually anyone born outside of an area or to a family with lesser means doesn't have the same network of contacts, and hence they don't have the same opportunities. And denying that, which many people do and they will, doesn't change a thing. It doesn't change anything. It is what it is. We have to understand this, accept it, and figure out how to work around it.
And to change it. How has who you know impacted you as a realtor, though? I mean, I see the connection of where you were born and your family, of that upward mobility, but does it impact what you do day to day?
It can. And it's so funny because as I wrote this, I remembered, you know, 20 plus years ago when I first got to Orange County. And I've always had a couple of global clients, you know, because most people who are global business people, they're pretty type A and they're pretty data oriented. So they're kind of my jam, right? So I had this international polo pony equestrian, amazing equestrian who had stables and stables of horses that others rode and competed in internationally. So this person was looking for a luxury home in Orange County. And when I called to make appointments to show this home, many of the agents had said, "I don't know who you are and I don't know who that is, and I'm not going to let you see this house."
Wow.
And I was like, "I'm sorry, excuse me?"
If you specialize in that area, wouldn't it behoove you to
Pun
follow
intended.
things like
Sorry.
behoove? You got me there.
Please go on.
What was I even saying at that point? Oh, if you're a realtor specializing in equestrian properties and luxury markets or trying to attract international investors, wouldn't you at least follow up and see?
Wouldn't you follow polo?
Right.
So if I said, you know, this person's name, you should know who it is. It's like the Bill Gates of polo.
Oh dear. Okay.
It was nutty.
If I remember though, that was the early 2000s.
Yeah, that was the early 2000s. People weren't Googling everything quite as readily then as they are now. And of course, now I've got a name and people know who I am. Sometimes
Yes.
they run screaming, but they do know who I am. So,
Yes,
yeah.
but just a catty comment aside, how many times do we get questions of things we want to say, did you just Google that? Because
Right.
it's really easy to find that out. All right, sorry. Thank you for indulging my pet peeve.
Yes.
All right, so that story of the polo player gone awry was the early 2000s. Fast forward to today. Can you compare, contrast? Please tell me that things aren't still happening in that way.
Things aren't happening in that way in particular. I think that because there is this compression on the market, agents are more interested in putting deals together than being exclusive the way that they were. So it's a little bit better. But I mean, bluntly, it's just a lot harder to buy a house these days than it was 2 years ago, and significantly harder than it was when our parents were first buying homes or their parents. So, when I, again, dug up the data, the median California home prices have increased 4.87 times in the last 30 years. But income's only increased 3.12 times. So the gap between our income and our housing cost continues to spread, and it's making it more and more difficult. And of course, tax laws have changed dramatically. There's a lot of things that have layered on burden for current homeowners to buy a home. And I would argue the longer you wait, the harder it's going to get.
That really hits to the heart of the issue right there. So much more burden. I always remember my father, who passed away last year. He would have been 86 years old, but he bought his first home in the mid 50s for $18,000.
Right.
And I think his monthly payment was something like $71 a month.
And that was probably what, maybe 2 years income or less.
Right, right. Exactly. And then he did move up when he had his first family into a larger home that was, I think he said $36,000, right in that frame. And he said that it scared the what out of him to do so. But he said that, quote, the economy was just getting so crazy that he was afraid he was never going to be able to buy a house again. So he moved up at that point. And not reconciling all the other factors in the economy and everything, he was always quite concerned that even though I had a condo and some other things, that I wasn't investing in the American dream the way he did.
Right.
And didn't understand why it wasn't as effortless for me as it was for him.
Exactly. And I hear that a lot. I hear a lot of people in their 70s and 80s saying, why didn't you just do this? And they're really not paying attention to the fact that the environment was completely different.
It's not the avocado toast, people.
Well, it's not. And back then, especially people who came into the workplace post-war, or in the, Vietnam era even, we didn't have, 1 and 2 employees got pensions. We didn't have guaranteed retirement. I mean, a lot of those benefits and those safety nets were stripped away. So it became more and more difficult to take risks, and became more and more difficult to actually afford it, even if you were willing to take the risk. So, yeah.
Well, I have a chilling question then. Pardon me. Is it too late for us? Do those advantages still exist?
They do. The challenge is figuring out how. Let me just say this. What we've come to think of as the American dream, like I said, the home, the picket fence, the 2 cars, whatever, that's probably not going to happen for as many people as it did before. 74% of people, according to that study, said that they value home ownership more than anything else. Yeah, only 56% of us in Orange County are homeowners. So there's a pretty big gap there. Home ownership is going to elude some people, and unfortunately, disproportionately, this impacts people of color. And there's a whole lot of reasons for that. And I'm not going to get on my sociological soapbox just yet, but we have to pay attention to that. I mean, this is, in my opinion, part and parcel, and pun absolutely intended here, to this ever-widening wealth gap. It's like we have to make sure that we're paying attention to equity in all things. And there is not yet homeownership equity. There's not. There's not lending equity. There's not employment equity. There's just not equity.
But that really begs the question, was the American dream really intended for all of us? Or are we just being guided and trying to be propelled by something that was so elusive, and that's the frustration?
It's funny for those of you who, you can't know what offline chats I have. Kara and I have actually had extensive offline conversations about what is the American dream? Is this really the land of opportunity? Was our country formed, intended to be the land of opportunity? And I naively believe that our founding fathers did intend this to be the land of opportunity for everyone, irrespective of race or social status. And that clearly is not and never was the case. So,
And that's not just your opinion. We're hearing more and more from a bevy of thought leaders, economists, respected leaders who are pointing out just that, and not in a sense of being negative or dissuading people, but in a sense of, come on, guys, we have to make this right.
yeah, we have, in many ways, whitewashed American history. And like Jack Rakov, Stanford University's professor of history and American studies, he said, and I'm quoting him again, when Thomas Jefferson penned, "All men are created equal," he did not mean individual equality. And that kind of blew my mind.
What does individual equality mean versus what he did mean?
He meant that our founding fathers intended for the American colonists as a people to have the same rights to self-government as did other nations, not individuals. And it wasn't intended really ever to be all the individuals in the colony were equal, obviously, because slavery was, not only known, it was largely condoned and accepted. So they certainly weren't equal. So this was not in their mind. And that was kind of a surprise for me to really get that fact.
And there are others who are echoing that right now. I mean, we have different social structures and, certainly, thankfully, a different world, but did it really get better?
In baby steps. And I like to think the more we are all talking about this, the more steps and the more larger steps we can take. I read a brilliant article published by the Brookings Institution, written by Isabel Sawhill. It's called "Still the Land of Opportunity." And in that, she shared this observation. She said, "I would argue that social origins or family background matter a good deal. Not everyone begins the race at the same starting line. The kind of family into which a child is born has much or more influence on that child's adult success than anything else we can measure. Yes, education is important too, but when we ask who gets a good education, it turns out to be disproportionately those from more advantaged backgrounds. Well-placed parents are much more likely to send their children to good schools and to encourage them to succeed academically. In short, although not as evident as in a class-stratified society, even in a meritocracy, one has to pick one's parents better."
Oh, picking parents.
Yeah.
It's like picking apples, right?
Right.
But we've always talked about some other fascinating studies that are kind of around this, and one comes to mind because picking parents isn't enough. There's this fascinating by studies that even how you look, these genetic factors, play into your potential success.
It's so true. And interestingly, this is something when I used to do new agent training, I would talk about, and that is genetics matter. Genetics just matter. I mean, there's this wonderful Reddit study. They reported that only 14.5% of adult men are over 6 feet tall, yet 58% comprise Fortune 500 CEOs. And further, only 3.9% are over 6 foot 2 inches tall, yet 30% are Fortune 500 CEOs. So obviously, it's not just birthright, it's also winning the genetic lottery, or as Warren Buffett liked to call it, the Lucky Sperm Club.
The Lucky Sperm Club. Warren Buffett was spot on with that.
I love him.
And there are so many efforts being done to overcome these prejudices, biases, and natural gaps that have occurred. Everything from technology, making sure that resume submission is more equitable. And we have laws in place now to prevent cherry picking of buyers for homes. And that's one of the reasons I believe that you actually want to talk about this. For those who don't know or are new to the show, Wendy really is a truth seeker, and that is your core value personally as well as professionally. That's even why we have the tagline for Veracity Real Estate Company is "The truth lives here." And you're willing to talk about things that others aren't, but, isn't that a professional hazard? Why are you even doing that?
I've gotten to the stage of my career where I just don't care. I don't care if someone's going to be upset by something I say. I don't care if someone's going to be offended that I've upset or offended their sensibilities, because I do my best not to be offensive. And I try not to get on a soapbox and preach. And I certainly don't want to dissuade anyone from trying to pursue the American dream, but I'm not going to say things I don't believe are true. So, I think it's my responsibility to remind people that the right to home ownership is granted to no one. This isn't a right for anyone from any social class or another. And it's the ability to do so. Again, it's so often leveraged favoring those people who were born to the right family. And it is not as much a reward for someone having worked hard and achieving accomplishments and achieving a good job, and there are still barriers in place. So
what I think about you, if you think of a traditional sense of privilege,
mm-hmm.
from the outside, your upbringing would seem like it, yet you matched it with incredible initiative and hard work.
Right. I mean, I know I'm fortunate. I know I'm lucky to have been born in Silicon Valley. I know I'm lucky to be of Nordic heritage. So I'm tall and I have blonde hair and blue eyes. And I know that affords me opportunities that somebody who is born in, say, India probably doesn't have. And I try to be mindful of that, and I try to be respectful of that. And I do my best to share as much guidance as I can with people from all walks of life.
And in a brief radio show or podcast, we're certainly not going to be able to delve into all the socioeconomic and other factors that got us here.
Yeah.
But this show is about real estate. So while we took a broad brushstroke at the history so that we had something to ground our discussion in, it's really more important of where do we go from here? How can we take what we interpreted and admit that some parts of it went awry, but not abandon that pursuit? What's next?
Well, the first thing I have to say on the daily, actually, is buyers are yearning for yesterday's interest rates, and sellers are yearning for yesterday's prices. And you have to stop looking backward. COVID pandemic frenzy was a moment, and the moment has passed. Those interest rates aren't coming back. We can't continue to operate our government with a Fed funds rate of 0. It's just not going to happen. So what we need to do is figure out what's going on in today's market, rethink your strategy, and make a different plan. And that's what I'm here for. And people who are the worst off, bluntly, renting and thinking, I'm just going to wait and save up money. Well, you know what your savings rate is? It's almost nil. You're not going to save up money fast enough to overcome the increase in prices. And they're already starting to inch up. And I'm not just saying this because I want everyone to go buy a house. If I thought the market was crashing, I would say, wait. I don't believe that's what's happening. And I'm really, really concerned that renters are going to shoot themselves in the foot by listening to the media that Paul was talking about prices falling. That's folly. And then conversely, I've got a couple of home sellers that I've sent messages to and said, hey, pay attention. The pandemic pushed your equity up so far, so fast. Do you have capital improvements planned? Because you are exceeding your non-taxable gain on your home's value. If I own a home that I live in as a single person, I'm a widow, so I don't have a husband now. I'm only not taxed on $250,000 worth of gain. If I were married, it would be $250,000 per person, so $500,000 worth of gain. If you had a $2 million house, that gain comes pretty quickly. So I'm out there advising people, look, what is your long-term plan? If this is your forever home, you're never going to sell it, okay, fine. But if you're thinking you might want to move up or move down or do something, you need to talk to your financial advisors and your tax advisors, because there are some gain issues here. And that's real money. And no one can afford to leave real money on the table.
And everyone needs to have that trusted advisors pool around them, as you're always talking about that. You use a market analyst as one of it, but having financial providers, financial analysts, attorneys,
Yes.
all there who know this inside and out to guide you.
Yes.
But,
yes.
But what kind of advice did you give to someone who's not wealthy and really wants to have a home?
Well, first of all, really understand what you can afford. And what you can afford may not be something you're willing to live in. And that's okay. There are areas we can still find an investment property for you that's far less expensive, that with the rental income and the tax benefits will pay for itself. And if we're strategic, it will also accrue in value. So do a sort of stepping stone process. But get in now so you can start building that equity and then turn that property into a larger one in a few years and a larger one and so on. You will eventually get there. If you do not start with something now, it's going to be exponentially harder later.
And some cities are trying to make home buying more equitable, right? What do you know
Yeah.
about some programs?
There are these wonderful inclusionary housing programs, and they go very quickly. But these programs are designed by, well, they're opted in by builders and developers at various cities. You can go to inclusionary housing, just Google inclusionary housing, and you can see the list of all the homes in Orange County that fall into this bucket. And they were built by builders originally to be sold only to low to moderate income people, and for a number of years they must be resold to people who meet low to moderate income guidelines. So that's one way for them to get in, and they're often, like Huntington Beach has had some, they're in really great areas. So this is a way people can get into an area. It might not be your number one priority neighborhood, but get your foot in the door. I mean, get in and start there. And something else, I mean, we've heard people talk about college tuition bills and, and these huge onerous expenses that these fresh graduates have. People don't commonly talk about teachers, law enforcement personnel, doctors, various other people who perform work that is vital to keep society going. They're often eligible for highly discounted loan programs. So these are ways to shave off, a few dollars here, a few dollars there. Every dollar matters.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, what you just said was about the buyers, but the American dream is also elusive to some sellers, right?
Yes.
What do you want them to know?
Sellers are conflicted by all the headlines Paul was talking about. Many of them are frustrated that they didn't sell last year or at the peak of the pandemic and got the top price. They're convinced prices are going down. They don't know what to do. All I can say to you is go seek a professional like myself. Talk to someone who has boots on the ground, on the front line, can tell you what is happening, because they're getting hamstrung and undecided, and they're not putting their homes on the market. And in many cases, they should have. Yes, they should have last year. And if they didn't then, they probably should now, because at least now they're going to sell a little bit lower, but they're also going to buy a little bit lower. And the challenge is that they're going to pay a higher interest rate. It just is what it is. Do you want to live in a house that doesn't suit you, or do you want to suck it up and pay a higher interest rate?
Can you give us some examples of how that plays out in Orange County?
Well, I mean, in most of Orange County, we can't put everything in one bucket, just like we can't say California real estate or SoCal real estate. The average over Orange County is, in most cities, values fell 11% off the peak last spring. So we're already at a discount of 11%. But with interest rates going up, let's just say somebody was going to buy $1 million home today, and that would have been, $1,110,000 back then. But if you buy it today, even with the lower price, with the higher interest rate, you're still paying $650 more a month. And that may be too much for some people to budget. So they have to figure out, all right, do I adjust the price of the home I'm looking for, or do I adjust my geography a little bit? But the conversation needs to be had, because waiting and sitting on your thumbs isn't going to change anything. If you need to move, if the kids need to be in school, if your parents need to move in with you because they're, having mobility issues, if, stop waiting for the universe to change. It is not going to change. You need to be more decisive.
More decisive, and being willing to figure out these new dynamics where people like yourself and other trusted advisors come in.
Yeah. This is what I do for a living. You've said over and over, I'm a market analyst. Excuse me, and I really am. I mean, I'm kind of neurotically always watching the market to see what's going on and checking neighborhood to neighborhood. I drive through neighborhoods, even if I don't have buyers in those communities, just to make sure I'm aware of how they look. Are they aging well? Are they gentrifying? Are they going fallow? What's going on? And so I'm constantly looking for places where people might find really good value for an investment. And I'm also always looking for neighborhoods where I think there's going to be accelerated appreciation for some other external reason, like we talked about. We talked about the streetcar going in through Santa Ana, connecting Santa Ana to Garden Grove. That's interesting. We've talked about the Olympic Games being held at the Honda Center. That's interesting. Of course,
Dana Point.
I've been talking about Dana Point for 4 years. People, listen. 3 years ago, you should have bought in Dana Point. You would have had 45% appreciation in value by now, which is crazy. You can still buy in Dana Point. The whole city is being rebuilt, and that harbor is going to become a global, I can't say this strongly enough, global destination for yachtsmen. So, buy Indiana Point. You know, there is a spot for everyone, and we can figure out how to make this cost effective. It's what I do.
Well, good show, Wendy. I'm sure we're going to have lots of feedback about this one.
That darn Wendy.
Yeah. What do you want for people to contact you?
Yeah, well, you know, if you want to reach out to me, feel free to email me at wendy@realveracity.com. That's REALVERACITY. Or just like John Stevens, you can call me 949-870-2424.
All right, Paul, what do you think about that? Let's go to our sponsors, perhaps.
I am dumbstruck. I don't know what to say. There is so much in that. You really took on a very deep, thoughtful discussion that I don't think we are discussing as a society enough of.
Thank you for that.
I really want to say that because let's plug the sponsors first and then let's come back to that, because the sponsors are part of this journey here, and we want to make sure that they get their due respect for helping us ride along and tell these kinds of stories. There aren't many places to hear this kind of stuff. And one of those sponsors today is Ford and DiIulio. It's an Orange County-based boutique litigation firm with experience with big law firms. Partners who founded it did so on the concept of aligned interest, where their success is tied to your success, and not just how much they drive up the billing. So if you're really looking for something that's both efficient and effective, if you want somebody who's going to engage in the relentless pursuit of your goals, whether in litigation, mediation, or even if it comes to trial, there's really one law firm you should check out, FordDiulio.com, FORDDIULIO.com. The American dream. We all grew up with it. We all believe in it.
Right.
We all think it's been around forever. And we think it applies to everybody, even when it doesn't.
It doesn't.
Can I make three little quick comments about the American dream? Number one, I wonder what happened to two trends that we all thought were definitely going to come. One was that millennials, my children's age, my daughter's age, we're never going to buy homes. They maybe aren't going to get married. They're not going to have kids. If they do, they're only going to have one kid, so they don't need a big backyard. And they saw what happened in earlier eras when people lost their homes and everything else. And the heck with all this, I'd much rather downsize and put my money into playthings or to lifestyle or to travel or to something else. Or I want it to be New York, where nobody has a car and we all just walk to everything here.
Yeah.
So in that world, like New York, nobody owns anything. That you own other things, but you don't own a house. That's just not your dream to do that. I don't know if that's happened or not.
It's interesting you bring that up, because we did all think that. And what I'm seeing is studies are showing that millennials are putting marriage off till later.
Right.
And they are putting off having children, if at all. But they're not dumb. They consume massive amounts of information and data. And they want to know how to prepare for their future. They want to know how to invest for their future. So they're looking at Wall Street investments, they're looking at, cryptocurrencies, and they're looking at real estate. And they're understanding that historically real estate has been a really important part of one's wealth and their legacy. So they're jumping in and they're finding a way to do it.
I look at my daughter, who's around 30, and her husband, and they have two kids, and I pushed them relentlessly. They were just forever renters, I thought. And I said, get in. Thank goodness they did get in.
Good for you, yeah.
A while ago. And so they saw massive appreciation on this little tiny condo they have that used to be an apartment once upon a time.
Right.
It's hard to believe that people even buy these things. But they have seen appreciation. All of a sudden, that whet their appetite for more. And now they're thinking of either moving up or finding a way, they don't know how they're going to do it, to buy another house someplace, maybe in a more downscale neighborhood like Santa Ana that they can rent out and do it. This fantasy, the American dream, has been ignited in their mind. It whet their appetite for more. They had zero interest in owning a home and playing that game until they did, and now all of a sudden they want more. They want a bigger house. They want two houses. They want other rental incomes, all these things that they suddenly have seen.
And here's an interesting statistic. Single women now outnumber single men in terms of home ownership.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
And I myself, there are two that leap to mind. I have two incredible women who were not yet 30. They were in their mid-20s, and they bought their first piece of real estate with me. And bravo, because in both cases it appreciated and they were able to move up into something that they really love. So I can't say this.
I vividly remember a woman I dated 100 million years ago, back in the 80s.
Back when you were dating.
Back when I was dating, back when Ronald Reagan was president. That was the last time I was dating. And I was struck at the time, we were both around 30, and I'm renting a house with some other people, and we're partying all the time, and I just, no thought of the future, of children or families or
Right.
picket fences, just, we're going to have a party house. She bought, and I thought, this kind of rundown neighborhood in Van Nuys, and I thought this funky little house, and I thought, why would you live there? You could afford where I live if you rent it, but you're going to buy this little rundown piece of nothing in the middle of nowhere here. I don't know whatever happened to her, but I'm sure she bought more and got farther ahead than I did, because
I'm
she had
sure
the
she
foresight
did.
to do that
Yeah.
when she was 30. And
She had someone like you pushing her,
yeah. Right, yeah, like I do with my daughter.
Exactly.
I was pushing the other way. Don't do that. When we were both 30, but now that I look at in the hindsight of history
hindsight's
here.
always 2020.
So that's one trend I thought would, and I don't know if it's happened or not to enough millennials, if they've suddenly bought into the program, if they're now back on the American dream, or if they're soured on the American dream, or just not interested in the American dream. I'd be curious about that one. And the second statistic or trend I thought was going to happen is my era, my group, the baby boomers. As we got older, empty nesters, we were going to downsize. And we were
Right.
probably not going to downsize locally. We were going to go to Arizona. We were going to go to
Florida.
We were going to go to Idaho. I can't tell you. And I knew a few people that did that. We're going to take the money and run. I got a bunch of money here. I'm going to apply it somewhere where I get a lot for a little, and I'm going to live off the rest. I didn't see much of that, though. I don't see
No.
the race to small towns that I thought was going to happen.
The things that I didn't see coming, and I think many of us didn't see coming, was that so many services now come to us.
Yes.
There's so many services come to
That's
our
true.
home, including physical therapy. I mean,
Yeah,
and
doctors, food, everything.
sure,
Right.
and the older people don't have to drive, and they can have social ride sharing. Call an Uber; he'll take you to your doctor's appointment. All of these things that often precipitated a move are making it more comfortable to stay in place. And again, a lot of these people own their homes outright, or they refinanced it to a 2.5% interest rate.
Right.
Where are they going to go?
Yeah.
Why would they sell that and move into something that's going to cost them more money but be actually functionally worth less?
And I didn't realize the power of the pull of grandkids, as I've gotten grandkids now.
I call it the gravitational pull.
Yeah,
Yes.
all of a sudden we could go somewhere else, but would we? Because we'd be so much farther away from those little creatures.
Right. And conversely, let's say your grandkids were in Idaho.
Yeah.
I bet you dollars to donuts.
We'd
You
move.
would think long and hard before you sold. You'd move. But would you sell the house?
Yeah, see, that's the other
Probably
one.
not.
I don't know.
And that's part of our problem with inventory.
The last is, again, one of the things that somebody told me years ago. It was actually our friend Rod, who's the children of immigrants, Palestinian refugees.
Yes.
And they did quite well. His father's made a ton of money and everything else. It paid off. The American move to here, the American dream paid off for them. He said something I'll never forget, that it's immigrants that keep this fantasy of the American dream alive, this land of opportunity, because they come from war-torn countries. They come as refugees. They have nothing. They're desperate. They do anything they can to get here. And when they do, they work 12 jobs and do 14 things that we would never even consider to do, 20 hours a day, 12 jobs at a time. Anything to get what was impossible to get where they
Right.
came from. So
Right.
they come here because of that illusion.
In
it may-
contrast to their departure country, it is a dream,
right.
But
So it may not be the dream for many of us anymore, but as long as we have immigrants still coming to this country, I think they nourish and keep the dream alive. And many of our other success stories today, when I grew up, it was Thomas. You'd hear the stories of Thomas Edison or Henry Ford or something. Now you hear the stories of the guys who started Google,
Right.
or all immigrants that
Right.
came here.
most of us are immigrants.
Right.
I mean, I'm second generation. My family came from Finland. So, to be anti-immigration is, in my opinion, to be anti-American.
And I'll say even more so, I'll get on my soapbox for 1 second.
Yay.
Immigrants aren't the problem. Immigrants are the solution. They bring new ideas. I understand it's got to be controlled. You can't just
Sure.
open the doors and flood it in.
No, we need legal immigration.
But that constant restocking of America and new ideas, and these people come, they will do anything to get here. That's the good thing. They'll work harder than we do.
Yeah.
Once they get here.
Many times.
And so I think that's what keeps the American dream alive. And the minute you shut the door, as so many want to do, I think the downside is you kill the American exceptionalism. If there is something exceptional about America, and we all think there is, I do.
That's a story for another day that we need to get a sociologist on to talk about that.
Yeah.
We do.
And most countries, does Finland think they're exceptional? I don't know. Do they think that they have a special place in history, that God picked them out of other people or other? I don't know if they do.
All I know is that we have the most beautiful prime minister. So she's stunning.
She is.
Wow.
She's like 30 or something.
Yeah,
She's young.
she's really, really something.
Well, we covered a lot of ground. There's one more thing we have to get back to before we round out this show.
Yes. I am excited to give an update on Veterans Legal Institute.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I am a board member there, and we've set the date for our annual gala. And this is always a big blowout. It always sells out. It's on November 6th. It'll be here in Orange County. We're still firming up the venue, but you can go to vetslegal.com and ask for more information and sign up. And this is something people, if you want to put your personal dollars, your corporate dollars towards a charity that is doing really, really great work, Veterans Legal is among the best of the best. I mean, they provide life-saving legal support and resources for at-risk veterans and their families. And by at-risk, I mean they're not getting their health benefits, they're sick and dying. They're not getting housing, they're unhoused, and they're on the street. They're getting discriminated against, and they're losing their jobs unnecessarily. I mean, really critically important work, and I'm delighted to be part of it. And I urge anyone, if you have a vacation home, you'd be willing to donate a couple days vacation as an auction prize, hit me up. If there's anything that you have that you would be willing to add to an auction, that's a wonderful luxury item you can share with them so we can raise money for these deserving veterans, please let me know.
Okay. I'm always stunned when we have veterans issues come in. We've had what's her name, Balta?
Antoinette Balta, she'll be back, yes.
On and talk about this, because somehow we assume, well, they're taken care of. They gave the ultimate sacrifice of time, of their limbs, of their life, of whatever it was, and they're taken care of. They're well funded, they're well taken care of. And it's far from the truth. They need advocates. They come out with problems and damaged and things and stuff, and how many of them are homeless, how many of them are struggling.
And asking someone who is a brilliant, brave soldier, who is someone who is out there, who is combat savvy, who can, run a tank, who knows how to do all these things, and then plunking them back home and saying, okay, you navigate the bureaucracy of the Veterans Administration, the largest part of the government that we have, with so many layers of nonsense. I couldn't navigate it.
Right.
We're going to take a look at other veterans issues and housing in some upcoming episodes. But in the meantime, Wendy, how can people find you and hear you?
Well, like I said, you've got my email and my phone number now. And of course, you can follow me, The Real Wendy Ross, on Instagram.
Not those fake ones. There's a lot of fake ones now jumping on the bandwagon saying they're Wendy Ross.
They all want to be me. What can I say? Or follow me on LinkedIn, where I'm simply Wendy Ross. And of course, you can listen to this podcast anywhere you most like to listen to podcasts.
And also, one more plug, please do follow us at our website, which is realveracity.com. Wendy will be publishing her monthly market report here pretty soon, and you can ensure you get a copy by signing up for our mailing list.
Perfect. Thanks, Kara.
See everyone next week.